Hi everyone, my name is Alistair Wheate from Analytica. I'm delighted to be joined here by Sarah Goodall and Danielle Guzman, and I'll let them introduce themselves in a moment. We're going to be talking today about employee advocacy and influencer marketing. Two areas there. There's been a lot of stuff written, a lot of stuff talked about these big themes, but how do they work when they are connected together? And does employee advocacy programs help influence marketing programs and vice versa? So before we go into asking some questions, I'd like, first of all, Sarah, to tell us a bit about yourself. What's your background? How did you get into this space?
So I'm Sarah Goodall. I work for a company called Tribal Impact, and my background is marketing. So I've always worked in marketing in the B2B sector, mainly in technology. So started with IBM, finished with SAP, and worked for Hitachi in between. So I've kind of always worked in the tech sector. And my journey into advocacy started probably about 10 or 11 years ago. It's about 11 years ago, 2009. I remember it because I remember sitting here thinking all this social media stuff, and everybody kept saying, oh, it's just for celebrities, and I'm thinking, nah, there's something in this. And SAP gave me the opportunity to go explore. And I did for about 7 years and just tried to grow a social culture internally. And that led me to get involved in the social selling program and the employee advocacy program. And then 5 years ago, I took voluntary redundancy and started Tribal Impact. And now we help other organizations socially activate their employees too. So that's me.
Great, thank you. Danielle, how about you?
Absolutely. My name is Danielle Guzman, and I'm the global head of social media for Mercer. And my history is interesting. I've been working in the employee advocacy space since late 2017, so not that long ago. My journey before then has always been predominantly in kind of the marketing and broader business development, really relationship-based businesses. I was at AIG before joining Mercer for 10 years in a series of roles there. And then prior to that, I was in the insurance industry, continuing with Guardian Life Insurance and a couple small boutique consultancy firms. Since being at Mercer, I have moved into the social media space, which is incredibly exciting and kind of at the forefront, in my opinion, of where all the marketing and business development is heading into. And I think our colleagues across the globe play an instrumental role in that success. So excited for today's conversation.
Great. Thank you both. And I would just say a little heads up for anyone listening. We're all working from home, and we've all got kids around the house somewhere. Hopefully they won't scream too loudly. I'm hoping my kids don't start fighting each other. Yes, we're all this is different times for these sort of webinars. But we'll see how we get on.
Makes us human, I think.
Yeah, I know. We're going to try and just do our jobs, right? And do some content marketing. So here we go. First question, right? So everyone listening hopefully knows the basics of what employee advocacy is all about. And hopefully everyone's got some idea of what influencer marketing is about. But what about those two when they're combined? Where is the intersection? What is a kind of a hybrid program of employee advocacy and influence marketing? Danielle, actually, do you want to maybe kick us off with telling us some what are your thoughts about where these two big sort of trendy themes actually start to cross over?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think to me, that's where the magic happens, frankly. And I think it's almost, I look at it as a curve. And even when we look at our organization across the globe, we're at different stages depending on what country you're looking at. Most often, as you know, most organizations just start with your traditional employee advocacy, and really all you are in the infancy is you're just broadcasting. So you're similar to a brand channel, but you're an individual and you're broadcasting most often corporate content. And so what I love is that you continue on that trajectory and colleagues kind of go through a maturity and start building their own personalities into that content and start balancing out what they're sharing with their own thoughts and points of view on that content, integrate their own pieces on top of that. They really start becoming influential within their organization. And then what we like to look at is then consider who are the communities that we're serving, the clients that we're serving, and who are the external influencers in those communities that are really leading with their own thought leadership and points of view, and how can we connect the dots with our colleagues and these external communities. And that really now allows for a really relationship-based conversation, going internally and externally two ways. And I certainly think that that's where there's so much value add for our colleagues because it gives them opportunities that wouldn't have otherwise materialized for them to build their professional personas externally, helps them with their objectives, both personally and professionally. And from an influencer perspective, it also helps them because they're now able to not necessarily always be in a monetary relationship with an organization, but truly have an authentic, organic relationship that helps them gain what their focus and objectives are at the same time as being able to help the organization. And to us, that's important because sometimes, as you know, as long as you have a monetary relationship, the minute that stops, the whole relationship ends. And I like to build things that are more sustainable, and people are investing their time in doing that because they truly believe in it and they want to do that. And when we connect our employees and influencers together, we kind of tilt the scale a little bit. It now becomes truly relationship driven as opposed to more of a transactional program.
Great.
Couldn't have said it
Thanks.
better myself. Honestly, absolutely brilliant. So,
shall we just stop the call?
Yeah, let's just stop them right there.
Finished. We're done.
I love it
But
because
it takes a lot of work.
it does, and also it's not so black and white, you know. I don't think, you know, it's not like make this call, get this meeting, you know. There's not this cause and effect. It takes time, it takes relationships, you know, it takes effort on both sides, and not every employee is ready for that. So I think probably where, I don't know whether we're going to touch on this, Alistair, but I think there is this preconceived idea that, you know, leaders, managers, executives, they all need to be influencers, right? So we're going to make them influencers. But actually, some of your best influencers can bubble up in your advocacy programs. Your most authentic experts, the ones that, you know, they can naturally find their way. I'm not saying executives and leaders can't, because they can be really good, but there are other people as well as different layers. And I love the idea of authentic, credible relationships with external influencers that is a two-way thing. You know, they get access to internal experts, and the internal experts get to talk to some of their probably, you know, the people that they look to as experts in the field. I mean, it's just a great way to build relationships and just makes it a bit more authentic, I think. So
yeah, and I love the point you make, Sarah, as well around it's not who they are. Quite often we get stuck with, you know, you see who maybe your top internal advocates are by geography or perhaps by a certain topic area, and the response is often like, well, those aren't my business leaders, or these aren't the people that are driving our sales, etc. I need these people to be doing it. And I think we're in a time now where anyone can be whomever they want to be, and it's not a matter of who you are kind of professionally or hierarchically, but it's the value you bring and the relationships you have and the investment that you put into your community. And I think that's an amazing thing, because it's, for the first time, a flat organization when you think of employee advocacy, and everyone has the exact same opportunity. It's all about how much it means to you and what you're going to invest into yourself and how you're going to give back to the community that you serve.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and also just looking about it from the other way around, like if someone's starting with an influencer marketing program, so they are engaging with external influencers and maybe they're creating content with them, or and again, you know, by influencers, we're not just talking about, you know, the quote unquote professional influencers. We're talking about people in all sorts of walks of life who just have a persona that people look to as being an expert or, you know, creative content creator. And brands are looking to engage with these sorts of people, but it's also great to see how sometimes the best way to engage with these influencers, when it's done in a kind of an organic way, is not necessarily from a kind of central organized marketing function. It's sometimes these kind of just this porous relational matrix where there's just people from your organization talking with influencers and building those relationships, and then the marketing team might go, actually, hey, look, you know, it's good you've already got a connection with that influencer, we'd like to invite them to an event, rather than us sending them an invite. Why don't you talk to them because you actually know them? So it's it's great to see that can also be a very powerful way of building up organically relationships with external influencers. We've touched on this a bit already, but hopefully you can't hear my kids screaming in the background right now.
Don't worry, I've just realised I've got a unicorn picture behind me, so that's a bit embarrassing. I need to get rid of that.
well, I've got Jabba's hat on my desk here, so I wonder what he thinks in a moment. But
I'd be lying if I told you I was not in the same situation.
Oh, it's the world
Great.
we live in.
Yeah.
I love it.
We're all going to remember 2020. Wow.
We certainly are.
Oh, wow. So what was I going to say? Oh, yes. I was going to
sorry.
ask, we've touched on this a bit already, but I was wondering, what does, from an organizational point of view, what does a good employee advocacy program look like when it's kind of intentionally being done to kind of link with external influences? Maybe Sarah, you want to kick us off on that one?
Yeah, so I think there's a misconception actually that advocacy is about just the broadcasting thing, Danielle, that you were talking about. It's like, right, all employees, we've told you for years not to talk on social media, but now actually we want you to talk on social media, and here's a tool that's going to let you blast out all our content, and then it becomes noisy, and I think quite often organizations make that mistake a little bit, and then they quickly realize as soon as things plateau and even nosedive that actually this perhaps wasn't the right way to do it. So then we end up getting involved in relaunching it. For me, it has to be, employee centric. You have to think about what's in it for the employee to really win the hearts and minds. This is a very tricky, complex program. You are teetering on the edge of, employee motivations, engagement in the brand, their purpose and role within the company. And then you're also asking them to align that to the company brand, purpose, values, So you are on the edge of something here. This is not just hey, can you just share some content? This is, hey, we want you to be part of the heart of the company. So it's a bigger, more complex program than just buying a tool and shoving some content in it. Where it comes to influence, though, and how an influencer program ties into advocacy, I think it's very much ties back to what you said, Danielle, about the maturity of an employee. They'll start with like a social zero. They'll have nothing. They don't know where to start. They might start engaging, liking, then they might start sharing, and then they might even start writing and creating their own content. And at that point, I think you can look into your advocacy tool data and you can start looking at behaviors. You can start looking at the people that are getting good engagements for every share, getting good clicks for shares, the mindful sharers, the ones that aren't just spamming it out, but the ones that are thinking about what they're sharing and does that align to my brand. They're the people that you could then bubble up as into an influencer activation program. And I think this is where, for me, the social media maturity of an employee naturally moves into that area, and the data can help inform that. So be interested to see what Danielle's view on that is.
Yeah. No, I think, you hit on, I was nodding my head as you're speaking, that we fully agree. And I think what I love the most is kind of two things. One, I always like to think that as an employee of an organization, you rent your brand to the organization. So I always want to make a very clear distinction to colleagues that you are not a megaphone for the brand you work for. Because if that's the case, you're not doing yourself any good. You're not putting yourself first. The organization is not putting you first. And frankly, to your point that you mentioned, it's going to peak and then it's going to just drop straight down, because quickly people are going to realize that these individuals don't have a real authentic channel. They have an agenda that is being driven by an organization. So I think authenticity in their own personal voice is so critical. And then I love the other kind of element you were talking about, and I like to look at them as personas, really. So as you were describing, when we look at an employee advocacy program, you have to understand that everyone is coming to this from a different point of view. So if you have 20,000 people in your organization, don't strive for 20,000 people in your employee advocacy program. Strive for maybe 10%. And then the 1% of that 10% will be the ones that will truly be engaging with the influencer community, but then make everyone feel welcome. So yes, you will have those colleagues that, to your point, Sarah, will just go in and click, share, click, share, click, share. And we may never be able to move beyond that. And that's where they're comfortable and that's what they really enjoy doing. So then we help them do that in the most effective way. And then you kind of have the next group that may slightly modify suggested share messaging to personalize it, but in a very kind of rigid way. And so you kind of start determining what these different personas are of individuals and their behaviors, and then you invest in each of them differently. And then ultimately, when it comes to the external two-way conversations, I absolutely agree with you. That's when you have like that really elite community that is truly sharing their own voice, starting to develop original content, and is also kind of understanding of that two-way conversation. I think it's a difficult leap sometimes to go from, oh, it's not just putting my stuff out there. I actually have to engage with communities and reciprocate back and give back. And I think that's a very different mindset than kind of the original intent that a lot of organizations maybe start with. But I think the most important part is it's kind of not vanilla, and you really need to determine what you're trying to accomplish, and then how can you best do that within the organization that you work in.
Yeah, and just to add to that, you've got to also, you mentioned, people are coming at this from different places, right? And they move at different paces. We've got different generations that learn in different ways. They have different roles, different motivations. Do you know what I mean? You are adding layer to layer to layer of complexity on top of this thing. And by the way, some are starting at social zero, some are already at social hero. So let's just, when you see all of this, it becomes quite a complicated mix. And it's not one size fits all. Here's the tool, download the app, click share. It's just more than that. You've got to do more than that. Alistair, are you still here?
I'm still here.
I'm just wondering whether you need to be on this call.
Yeah, I'm just gonna go get some popcorn
I absolutely love the from social zero to social hero, Sarah. That's one to keep.
Well,
That's
I like
brilliant.
your, being authentic rather than having an agenda. I like that as well. Yeah.
What about anything I've said?
Oh, yeah. Sorry about that. What did you say? Sorry, Alistair.
It's okay. So I have more questions though. Yes.
Oh, okay.
So because I want to pick up some of the stuff you've been saying about how so you have these employees who might be social heroes, and they are becoming influential in their own right. And I totally hear what you're saying, that I think many of the programs that are called employee advocacy is just employee amplification. It's just this kind of ritual kind of resharing of content that's come from someone else. But what are the sort of examples that you can share where you talked to Danielle about these kind of reciprocated relationships between an employee and, let's say, an external influencer, where there's been some dialogue and conversation? What are good conversations or meaningful interactions look like? And any examples you can share, or what do they have to always be specifically about the topic that the marketing team wants them to talk about, or are there other kind of interactions that will be beneficial as part of a wider program?
No, I think that's a great question. And I would actually say the more unstructured, the more really valuable they are. So for example, when I look at, individuals that are very active in terms of an employee advocate, and we look at the influencers that are in that same space. So one thing I always encourage colleagues to do is to what we call pick a swim lane. So you can't be everything to everyone. So if your organization has, 7 lines of business, please don't strive to be an employee advocate across all 7. There has to be 1, maybe 2 that you deeply connect with on a personal and professional level, and you're comfortable in speaking about them. So maybe it's healthcare. In that case, don't feel the need to share the rest of your employers' content, but focus on healthcare. And so we obviously look at that, and then we map colleagues that way. Then we look at who are the healthcare influencers that we're either engaging with or aspire to engage with. And for those that we are engaging with, we on channels actively connect people. So for example, Alistair, if you're a colleague and Sarah's a thought leader in the space, and I'm connected with Sarah, then I may introduce you to Sarah on Twitter or on LinkedIn or on any social channel, and say, and bring you together around a common conversation that's maybe being shared over a weekend, over something that you're doing, or perhaps a piece of content that you've shared, and say, have you seen Sarah's latest blog? This is really interesting, thought you might like it. And it's these kind of organic moments.
Funny, sorry, I just, my computer's flashing at me badly.
Uh-oh.
Oh, he's gone.
Oh no! I guess
well, actually, we didn't need him. Poor old Alistair. Go on, keep going, because I was listening. You were right in the thread then.
Yeah, no, so I mean, basically, we look for these moments of authenticity and we create them. So, for example, I actually personally enjoy finding people to connect with one another because it helps both of you. And then both of you take it in whichever direction you choose to. And whilst one person might actually be kind of an employee and the other might be someone that we work with in a professional capacity, that doesn't mean that you can't flourish us into something else. And then we don't know where it'll take us, but then you both become part of each other's community. So if you envision that multiplying over and over, that is one of the ways that we do create kind of these authentic connections. Now, if one or the two of you choose not to take it up, that's also equally natural. So I think that's part of the beauty of it, is it's not guaranteed outcomes, but it's a lot of opportunities.
Yeah, I love that. Love it. Yeah, I love the whole pick your swim lane, because that's the thing, you know, when you say, I'm connected to marketing people, and you just, when you see them sharing technical content or something that doesn't quite map to their role, you kind of think, well, what's going on here? Because actually, you know, that's not, oh, hey, Alistair.
Oh no, sorry about that. It's just,
Welcome back.
Yeah.
why is my video not working? Video, come on, let's try it.
There you go.
Hello.
We carried on. Did you leave? I'm joking. I'm joking. It's good. Oh, this just, honestly,
Sarah's always
play
mean
that
to
could
me.
go wrong, this is, isn't it?
I know. And I've just, it's taking in from a different webcam now. Let's see if I can change it to the, oh no, is it the same one? I just want to see if, is it that one?
But Sarah, finish your thought. That was great.
Sorry, did I interrupt an insightful
Yeah,
moment here?
honestly, we carried on. Really, we did. In the nicest possible way. I can't
We don't need that
man.
man.
No, you were talking about, which I think is such a key point, that when someone's channel is talking about technical content, health content, they're all over the place. It's difficult for someone to really understand who is Danielle. What is she known for? What should I expect from this individual? Because you're all over the place, which is why we really enforce and say, pick a swim lane. And if you've mastered a swim lane and you feel really passionate about a secondary focus area, that is great. But don't go out there and be all for everyone, because then you're really.
Do you know what I found though, Danielle? I don't know about you, but the more that we do these programs, we realise that quite often employees don't know what their purpose is. You know what I mean? You almost got to take a step back and actually help them understand what got them to where they are, why they love what they're doing, why they're in the job that they're in. I mean, we work with legal teams. You know, there's no way I could work in the legal industry. You know, I couldn't study that. I'm not wired that way. So I kind of think, you know, well, what is it about this role that motivates you? Why are you in this space? Because that's the passion, that's the difference. And sometimes people need that unpacking, because you're so focused just getting on with day to day that you actually forget why you are who you are and where you are. And so when you say pick the swim lane, quite often they're a bit like, oh, which one should I go in? Because I'm not quite sure who I am or what I want to be or where I'm going. So sometimes you have to unpack that a little bit.
Yeah.
So.
How important is it to kind of set the expectation right early with them, that, you know, they're not expected to suddenly get thousands of followers and have like loads of engagement? You know, that what matters really is just, you know, like, you're our expert on you know, video streaming and or, you know, I don't know, cloud or you know, digital transformation or whatever it is, and these are 10 people who are external influencers, and you know, just connect with those 10 people. And I think, you know, everybody can probably do something like that. You know, that's not a daunting prospect, hopefully, for someone, you know, just to try and, you know, build a relationship with 10 people online and, you know, share content from them, with them, talk to them. They don't need to suddenly get thousands of clicks. I think often one of the problems is that a lot of these employee advocacy platforms have this kind of gamification system, and it's all about this kind of bean counting of, you know, who got the most likes and stuff like that. And actually, what matters is, you know, this person got, you know, maybe 1,000 likes, but this person over here actually got 2 replies from someone who was actually really significant to us as an organization. That's far more important for us, you know, because that could be maybe a future client coming through that interaction. And there's often that kind of qualitative element of the actual relationships, rather than just counting likes, that's missing. Yeah, so yeah, I don't know if that's maybe if there's some particular examples of metrics that you guys have used. How do you measure, you know, who's doing a good job of this from an employee point of view?
I think that's such a great question, Alistair. And I have a mental image in my head of bean counting right now. You were talking. But you bring up a great point of, yes, you bring up a great point though of, what should you measure? And that should be, and that's not necessarily the same thing for everyone, but are you measuring the right things? Because, sometimes you start off with a program and the first thing you think that we're going to measure is the number of shares. Well, I mean, all of a sudden you start noticing that colleagues are sharing 500 times a week, which is probably not what you're aspiring for. And so how you set that up from the beginning, and I think it should also change. I know that from our perspective, what we started measuring is very different than what we measure today, because the program evolves, matures, becomes much more kind of segmented. And so you start changing the different ways that you measure things. But I always look to measure from a perspective of value creation. And value creation doesn't mean follower growth. Engagement to me is much more valuable than follower growth, and the conversations that you're having. And when we talk with our advocates, Sarah, when we were talking about swim lanes, and fully agree that some colleagues just don't know where to start, we always try to look at it and break it into 3 buckets, right? So a part of your time will be talking about branded content. A part of your time should be something that is who you are. What do you enjoy in life? Are you an activist around pets or nature? Are you a runner? What are the things that you enjoy in life, and can you bring that out in what you're doing? And then the last part is really your conversation. And I think when we look for KPIs, we want to really lead with that kind of conversation and engagement piece. And then we do look at kind of the content that we're providing colleagues to share, and who is sharing that content, and are they the right individuals? And by right meaning, is it a natural fit that they should be sharing that because it's their passion, or it's something that they have decided they want to invest in, and they understand the space? Or are they just kind of trying to figure themselves out, so as you were saying, Sarah, which means you kind of see them a little bit all over the place. And don't get tripped up on KPIs that are just being given to you. Often, and I think it's important to challenge back, often you'll just be given KPIs, sometimes from individuals who don't understand employee advocacy, who don't understand social media, and you're measuring the wrong things, and you can make decisions that are not in the best servicing of your employees or the organization as a result. So it's so important that those of us in this space speak up and make the recommendations back. I recommend we measure this instead, and here's why. And I do find from my experience that individuals are open to that and want to hear that information and are appreciative of it, rather than kind of just checking the box and sending over what they want and hoping people will stop asking questions.
Quite often we see, because we do network map analysis, and sometimes we see these employee advocacy programs, and it really sticks out like a sore thumb sometimes on these network maps, where the employee advocacy and all the engagement has been from the other employees. It's just like, it's like, hey,
it's a bit of an echo chamber.
Yeah, I've got 50 likes. So the CEO posts something, and then it's all likes from the loyal subjects. And it's like, great. So it was just this little bubble. You just all spoke to each other and shared each other's stuff, and actually, you didn't have any, engagement from outside your own staff. So it's like, but if you're just looking at numbers, but I think that could look.
If you go back to the original question you had asked a few questions ago, where you talked about kind of connecting employees with influencers, and the whole conversation we're even having, I think as that piece comes into action, you start seeing that echo chamber diffuse.
Exactly.
And you still have those pockets of colleagues speaking to themselves. And in many situations, that's a good thing. And for example, in the world we are in today, right? The colleagues around the world in organizations, many probably have never worked remotely before. So the opportunity for them to come together on channels and share, inspire, provide tips, learnings, etc. That's probably a great reason to have an echo chamber. But when it comes to the employee advocacy and driving business thought leadership, that's where something like the connectivity with the influencers enables these employees to make friends and connections outside of their colleague community. And now you start seeing the real value, because now when you start seeing those clicks and those likes, you start seeing 5% come from outside. Next thing you know, you see 8%. And that's what we really like to measure. And next thing you know, you start seeing the influence of that individual kind of ticking up a little bit. And you start looking at why that's happening. And that's when it gets really exciting, I think.
Yeah. totally based on, I would advocate that. It's very easy to get sort of with the dashboards, and you can see the thousands of likes and the millions of impressions, and for social media practitioners, we've had this for years, haven't we? And I think it's kind of it's more than that now, and it's tying it into existing metrics. So one of the metrics that a lot of our customers look at is the amount of traffic driven to a website from employees versus other sources, and even taking that a step further, looking at asset consumption, downloads of resources, leads generated. Now you're starting to look at existing metrics, but how it's influenced by employees, and that's really what matters. And quite often you see, when you start measuring that, you see employees, whilst they don't drive thousands of eyeballs to the website, they do drive the right ones, because it's those ones that are converting at a much higher rate than any other source of traffic, even compared to brand channels. So measuring the right things, I think, and digging into the data beyond the dashboards is quite important for success.
Yeah. And I would add also, to that, we also look at those. I love those metrics. I think those are spot on. And then we also look at attributable revenue, whether it's initiated or engaged, because that whole sales cycle is this crazy, scribbled drawing nowadays. But more often than not, your colleagues and through their networks are getting in front of the communities that you're looking to bring in as your future clients. And so we do look at that as well. And most importantly, Sarah, we share it back.
Yeah.
So let your employees know the value they're bringing. We know it, and the leadership knows it, but let them know that, you've done all this and it's been in service of increasing our traffic to our websites by X%, or you contributed to 10% of the downloads of this critical program that we launched in the first quarter. And they love that. It helps them see how much connected they are and the incremental value they're bringing to the organization above their day-to-day. And I think that's such an important piece.
Yes, totally. And yeah, it's been mentioned already. The world has indeed changed, and we're in very different times now. People who are running employee advocacy programs, any practical tips for how to either keep them going, or are there things they should be doing differently now? Is this actually an opportunity, because there'll be some people who are just have always resisted doing anything online, and now they have to? Just maybe a couple of practical tips and recommendations from both of you, just to finish our chat off on things to try, maybe they haven't tried before, things to do differently.
I've got a couple of tips, only because I feel inspired after talking to some customers this morning. For a start, I think, given the situation we're in at the minute, it's going to accelerate the adoption of digital within the business. It has to. All those companies that were hesitant about adopting remote working, flexible working, well, guess what? Your hand is forced. Okay, yes. So you are going to have to do it. I think advocacy has a great place when it comes to building community. So I think what you're going to start seeing now is people using it less as a tool and more as a community base, a place where people can share, engage, and swap ideas. And a lot of these advocacy tools will allow you to create internal only content as well as content for external sharing. And I think for me, a top tip might be, in this situation where we're at now, that you could start using that as a way to, share pictures of like your home space, like how have you set yourself up, what's your view, what's your coffee machine look like. You can get some community spirit going to elevate that program from being just a tool for sharing to a program for community. And I think that in itself will increase adoption. It will increase activity, membership rates, the basic metrics to give you an indication as to how the program's going. But that will then filter through, right? And people will get the idea, and they'll become socially confident in a safe environment before letting them loose externally. So you've got content internally that is not going to go too far, and then you can switch them on to go external. So you're building that social behaviour in a safe zone, so I think that would be my top tip for now.
Thank you.
Absolutely love those, Sarah. And especially I had a similar conversation yesterday about the future of work and the remote work and flexible work, and we had the same takeaway that talk about kicking that into overdrive.
Yeah.
So it's incredibly true. So I absolutely echo the idea, the sense of community. One of the top tips that I've certainly been sharing is so many of us from a colleague community have colleagues that may never have worked remotely before and may not even be engaged socially, and to help bring them in, offer a hand, almost, grab their hand and take them to the playground and introduce them to the community.
Just
and I'm seeing this
first,
more and more. Yeah, I'm seeing this more and more now. Yes, a good point. Virtually hold their hand. But I'm seeing this more and more where, someone may all of a sudden introduce, hey, to my Twitter friends, wanted to introduce you to Lucy. She's just new to Twitter and wanted to welcome her into the community. And then everyone kind of welcomes them in, and regardless of the social channel, but it's letting people know that there is a place that they can come, and colleagues are sharing, exactly as you were saying, Sarah, maybe photos of their home office or a tip of the day or how I survived my first day of homeschooling while working, and recognize that you're not alone. We actually have both an internal and an external community in the platform we use. So 100% agree with you, Sarah. One of the things I do recommend is we've created a category that's exclusively for very topical content for our clients and the communities we serve right now. Make it easy for your employees to find that content. And then equally so, the same type of community for them to be able to communicate with one another and learn and feel a sense of commonality with one another as well. And you'll find that more and more people will now be coming into that conversation, and we'll be at a very different place 2, 3, 4 months from now, as these colleagues have now started coming onto social media for reasons of their own. And now we have an opportunity to help them continue building that professionally going forward.
Absolutely.
Yeah, my recommendation doesn't sound as clever as what you said. I was going to suggest live streaming your pets or something like that. But
that's fantastic.
It works. I've seen so many pictures of dogs and cats sitting on laptops on LinkedIn this week. It's it's just changed the whole content feed. So
yeah, I think it's in a way that there's potentially a lot of. I mean, I know it's obviously overall the whole situation is terrible, but we've got to look for positives. And I think if this actually just enables people to be a bit more human in their day jobs, and get people to. I found out stuff about my colleagues already, just about their families, and when we're all together again, we'll feel a heck of a lot closer and united as a team. So hopefully there are some good things that can come out of it. And yeah.
And then one last thing I would say is never. I always tell people, if you've done something that has helped you in some way, it will probably help someone else too. So never think that something you've done is like, oh, well, this is insignificant. So many tips right now, I think, can help so many different people across the globe. And there's always someone appreciative. And the beauty of social media is obviously everyone is coming at it from a different situation. So we often kind of self-impose these views of, I have to make sure it's perfect or this or that.
Yeah.
I think now is the time to, authenticity is truly what's going to help build connections, because everyone is in some capacity in the same situation across the globe.
Yeah. It's a complete leveler.
Yeah, so just to add some more authenticity. So,
you play when you're bored on a conference call. Is that what you're doing?
Oh yes.
Just rebuilding your Star Wars Legos.
Yes.
I'm just surrounded by more friends. They're all around me.
I could just imagine you just piled up with like toys, and you really have got.
I'm not kidding. It was right when the call started. I was like, everybody out? I have to get on the call.
Love it.
Well, this has been an authentic chat, hasn't it? So,
it's been brilliant. I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I've absolutely loved talking with you both. Thank you so much. And there's been loads of really great tips and advice there. And yes, hopefully it'll be immediately relevant for people. And, when we're hopefully out of this situation or back to normal, there'll be lots of really good things that people can carry on doing that maybe they had to learn in a hurry, without just get thrown in the deep end and have to figure it out. But guidance from you guys is really helpful. Thank you so much. And look forward to chatting again another time.
You're welcome.
Stay well.
Thank you.
Thank you.